He owned skyscrapers that pierced the clouds, companies that shaped economies, and cars so rare they were whispered about in private clubs, but no one had ever truly chosen him. On the night of his 50th birthday, Adrian Hale stood alone in the glass tower that bore his name. Below him, the city glittered like a field of diamonds. Inside the penthouse, a table stretched across the marble floor, decorated with imported roses and gold-trimmed plates. A 5-tier cake waited to be cut. 50 chairs. 49 of them empty. The invitations had been accepted weeks ago. Politicians. Business partners. Socialites. Even the woman he had quietly loved for 3 years, Vanessa Cole, a fashion icon who loved cameras more than conversations. But when the clock struck 9, the excuses began arriving instead of the guests. Urgent meeting. Flight delay. So sorry, darling, something came up. Vanessa didn't even text. She posted a photo instead, smiling on a yacht, champagne raised, ## living my best life. Adrian turned off his phone. Behind him, soft footsteps echoed. Sir, should I clear the table? It was Mira. Mira had worked in his home for 2 years. She was quiet, efficient, almost invisible, the kind of person wealthy households forget to notice. She came from a small village, sent most of her salary to her mother, and wore the same silver bracelet every day. Adrian looked at the empty chairs again. No, he said quietly. Bring 2 plates. She hesitated. Sir? You're the only one who showed up. That was the first time he had ever really looked at her. They sat at opposite ends of the long table, awkward at first. Mira kept her eyes lowered. Adrian cut the cake himself. To loyalty, he said, raising his fork with a faint smile. To kindness, she replied shyly. It was the first genuine toast he had made in years. Adrian Hale had not always been wealthy. He had grown up in a cramped apartment above his father's failing hardware store. His mother used to say, if you can't be loved for who you are, build something so big they can't ignore you. He took those words literally. By 30, he had launched a tech company. By 40, he was on magazine covers. By 50, he had everything, except someone who saw him without the headlines. Vanessa had loved the gala invitations, the diamond necklaces, the interviews where she stood beside him. But whenever Adrian spoke about his childhood, his fears, his exhaustion, she changed the subject. You're too serious, she'd say. Relax. We're winning at life. Winning. Yet that night, sitting across from Mira, who laughed nervously when frosting stuck to her finger, he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. Days passed. Something shifted. Adrian began noticing things. How Mira hummed old songs while arranging flowers. How she carefully polished his late mother's antique clock. How she always left a handwritten note reminding him to eat when meetings ran late. One evening, he returned home early and found her in the kitchen, staring at her phone with tears in her eyes. What happened? He asked. She jumped, startled. Nothing, sir. Mira. She swallowed. My mother, the doctor says she needs surgery. It's expensive. How much? She shook her head quickly. I will manage. I will work overtime. Adrian didn't hesitate. It's handled. Her eyes widened. Sir, I can't. It's not charity, he interrupted gently. It's gratitude. For the first time, she looked at him not as an employer, but as a person. Thank you, she whispered. Word travels fast in elite circles. When Vanessa discovered Adrian had transferred a large amount of money to his maid's family, she stormed into his office. Are you out of your mind? She snapped. Do you know what people are saying? I don't care. You don't care? She laughed coldly. You built your reputation carefully. And now you're risking it for a servant? Her words hit him harder than he expected. A servant. That's how easily society categorized people. Adrian leaned back in his chair. You know what's funny, Vanessa? What? She's the only person in my house who treats me like a human being. Vanessa's expression hardened. If you continue this, whatever this is, we're done. Adrian didn't answer immediately. For years, he had feared losing her. Feared the headlines. Feared the loneliness. But suddenly, clarity replaced fear. Then we're done. She left without looking back. And for the first time in his life, Adrian didn't chase after someone walking away. Mira's mother's surgery was successful. When Mira returned from visiting her village, she brought homemade sweets wrapped in newspaper. My mother says you are a blessing, she told Adrian. He smiled softly. I'm just a man who had an empty birthday. She tilted her head. Sir, why didn't anyone come? He considered lying. Instead, he told her the truth. Because I spent my life being impressive instead of being present. She didn't fully understand the corporate politics, the media games. But she understood loneliness. Money makes noise, she said thoughtfully. But respect is quiet. Those words stayed with him. Months passed. Adrian began changing. He reduced extravagant parties. He invested in employee welfare programs. He visited the lower floors of his company without cameras. He listened. The tabloids grew bored of him. Billionaire loses sparkle, one headline read. But inside his home, something warmer was forming. One rainy evening, the power went out. The city plunged into darkness. Adrian and Mira sat near the window, watching lightning split the sky. Are you afraid of storms? She asked. I used to be, he admitted. When I was little. My mother would light a candle and tell stories until it passed. Mira stood quietly, then returned with a candle from the kitchen. She placed it between them. Then tonight, we don't fear the storm. It was a simple gesture. But in that dim light, Adrian felt seen, not as a billionaire, not as a powerful man, but as a child who once feared thunder. Not everyone approved. Board members questioned his decisions. Friends whispered that he was losing his edge. Success requires distance, one colleague advised. You're getting too emotional. Adrian finally understood something important. He had built an empire out of fear, fear of being ignored. But respect, he realized, was not demanded through power. It was earned through humility. One afternoon, he did something unthinkable in his world. He introduced Mira publicly. At a charity gala, when reporters asked about the inspiration behind his new foundation for healthcare access, Adrian stepped aside and gestured toward her. This, he said simply, is the person who reminded me why I started. Cameras flashed. Whispers erupted. Mira stood frozen, overwhelmed. But Adrian's expression never wavered. For the first time, he wasn't hiding the most meaningful part of his life. Years later, people would tell their story in many ways. Some said the billionaire fell in love with his maid. Some said he lost his mind. Others called it a scandal. But those who truly knew them understood something deeper. Love had ignored him when it wore diamonds and demanded perfection. Respect had found him in quiet footsteps and honest gratitude. Adrian eventually asked Mira a simple question, not in a ballroom, not on a yacht, but in the same kitchen where she once cried over her mother's surgery. Will you walk beside me, he said, not behind me? Tears filled her eyes. Yes. Their marriage was small. No celebrities. No gold-trimmed plates. Just close friends, employees, and a candle lit in memory of his mother. On his 51st birthday, there were still no 50 guests. There were fewer. But every chair was filled. And this time, Adrian didn't look at the skyline. He looked at the people around the table, at the woman who respected him when he felt invisible. And he understood something that money could never buy. Being admired feels powerful. But being respected feels like home. If you build your life only to be loved by the world, you may end up surrounded and still alone. But if you treat people with dignity, no matter their title, you might discover that the greatest wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the quiet hands that stay when everyone else leaves.